I'm sure we can all think of some point in the last month, maybe in the last week, maybe in the last day, maybe in the last couple of hours, where we've got into a fight with somebody, some kind of argument, some kind of disagreement, where I'm sure if I asked for a show of hands, we'd all put our hands up. Where for whatever reason, me and somebody else saw something a different way. We had some kind of disagreement, different perspective on something. Maybe someone else did something to us, and it created a division, a fight, that tool that the enemy often uses to try to separate us from each other. I think from the beginning of humanity until now, division has been one of the devil's favorite and most useful tools to try to draw us apart from each other and to try to draw us apart from God. Like even from the days of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, all the way up to now, even in like Jesus' own apostles in the gospel today, we see division always cropping up. In the gospel today, the apostles James and John are trying to vie for the seats of power, and the other 10 get angry at them, and there's a division that breaks out because they're all trying to vie for power and fight for power. And I think you can look at our world nowadays and see that division is just as present as ever. I think we live in a world that seems to be marked more than anything by division, by disagreement, by that us versus them mentality. And that's what division does. Like the word literally, it divides, right? It separates people into different groups. Me versus you, us versus them. To use the language in the gospel today, it's like the ruler versus the ruled, right? It separates us into camps. And usually the camp that I find myself in is right, the other camp is wrong, and it becomes this argument over like who's going to be able to exert power more over the other, right? And it's usually the other person who's the problem. So if they would just listen to me, if you would just think like I would, if you would just see what my perspective is, that's usually the source of the issue. It's those people over there who are the issue. And if they would just listen to me, then everything would be great. The devil loves to try to use that kind of division to try to stop the plan of God from unfolding in our world, because we get so focused on what is wrong with society, what is wrong with the other person, that that's all we see. And we miss what God could be doing in the midst of the broken situation. So I'm so focused on trying to fix what is wrong or to tell the other person why they're wrong, that that's all I can see and that's all that I can focus on. Regardless of the situation, regardless of whatever the circumstances are, who's actually right or who's actually wrong, as soon as we begin to operate out of this like me versus somebody else mentality, I think we've already walked into the devil's trap, because that separation already exists. And Jesus' very strong warning in the gospel today is that we cannot and will not operate out of that mentality. There cannot be an us versus them that we're operating out of, because if we're honest, I think Jesus does a good job at showing us this in the gospel today. If we're honest, there is no like us versus them. There's just us. And we're all imperfect. We all stand in need of help and mercy. None of us have the full picture. There's no us versus them. There's only us. And whether we realize it or not, that's what we acknowledge at the beginning of Mass, right? Every time we come to Mass, the first thing we do is we say, I confess to God and to everybody else in front of me, around me, that I have greatly sinned. I have sinned is what we say through my thoughts, through my words, through what I've done, through what I failed to do. I'm a sinner and I stand in need of mercy. I'm not perfect and I don't have it all together. So we begin every Mass by acknowledging, which is so important, right? We begin by acknowledging the fact that, attention everybody, I'm the problem. I stand in need of help. I'm imperfect. My own pride, my own sin, my own hurt and pain that I often operate out of, my own limited view. That's the real issue. It's not somebody else's fault. If I want to work for a world of unity, it's got to begin by recognizing I'm the problem. And that's where the real work of healing needs to happen, not in somebody else, but in my own heart and in my own life. Now, it is really hard to acknowledge that, and it's even harder to operate out of that mentality. I think that's why at the beginning of Mass, we just kind of go into autopilot, because I don't like to admit that I'm the problem. I don't like to admit that I need help, that part of me that's broken in here needs fixing. I don't want to admit that. And I think that's why we so often seem to fall and fail in striving for unity, and why division, gossip, jealousy, all these things are so easy to fall into, because it's a hard truth to live out of. And I think the fact that we so often fail can lead to another kind of division, and that's that division of God versus me. I feel like God is angry at me because I keep falling all the time. I feel like I'm not good enough to approach God, that God is disappointed in me because I just can't get my act together. And that's the division that I think the enemy wants to sow more than anything. And that is the last division that God ever wants to exist within our own hearts. Second reading that we hear in Mass today so beautifully speaks directly to that. Jesus is not one who is upset or disappointed or angry at our own failures, our own sufferings, and our own struggles. Rather, like the reading says today, he knows our weakness, he knows our struggle, and he's not surprised by that. We don't have to hide that from him or pretend that we have it all together. He doesn't say, how could you do that? I thought you would be better. I would never do like that. Why don't you act more like me? And then things would be so much better. That's not how he operates. Whenever we come before him with our failures and our struggles and our divisions and our hurts and the real problems of our hearts, he says, I know, it's okay. We're going to move forward together. And if you give me a chance, if you let me in, watch what I can do in your life. And so the reading closes with that beautiful line, we can confidently approach him to receive not condemnation, to receive not judgment, but to receive a timely help, to receive his grace, to receive his mercy. Another beautiful part of Mass, right before we receive communion, we all profess, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you. I'm not worthy to have you enter into my roof. But then it's to those people who are unworthy that God desires to give himself to immediately after that. It's okay to admit that we're the problem, because he knows that he's the solution. He wants to be the solution if we give him the chance. What if, like for a little bit, we all stopped pretending like we had it all together or that we know everything? And what if we stopped expecting everybody else to have it all together and to always be perfect and always do the right thing? What if we can honestly admit, I am broken and imperfect in sin, and so does everybody else? And so what if our default was mercy rather than division? What if our default was compassion over gossip and complaining and all these things that sow division, right? Imagine the world of unity that would create. And I think that's a world that I know it's a world that we desperately need, and it's a world that we desperately want to live in. We don't enjoy division, we enjoy being united. If we want to fight for unity, it starts not with the other person, but it's got to start with me. Confidently approaching the throne of grace and asking the Lord for the help and the healing in our hearts that we need. And that is what he desires to give us. So today, the invitation is to bring the real problem, which is our own hearts, to the Lord. And by his grace, he can bring healing. And that's going to be the first step for living in a real world of unity. Amen.